Dock workers in the US are on strike. This is going to have a huge impact on the price for all sorts of things. But what is it going to do to lumber prices? Tens of thousands of dock workers who are part of the ILA union are currently on strike. This means that ports from Maine down to Texas are essentially shut down until the strike can be resolved. The reason the workers are striking is because they haven't had a pay raise in quite some time. So they're demanding better pay, they also want better health care, and they also have concerns over job security in light of automation at the ports. And the strike is meant to put pressure on management so that they'll give them the concessions that they're looking for. To be clear, I'm not taking sides here, but rather just want to talk about how this strike is going to impact prices generally and the price of lumber specifically. So first of all, there will be a significant impact to the price of all sorts of things. Basically, any commodity that comes into ports on the East Coast is going to be impacted. This includes things like chemicals, plastics, rubber, oil, cars, or other things that would come in through the Atlantic or through eastern ports. When the supply chain for these products is constricted like this, what happens is prices go up. And the reason for that has to do with basic economics and the relationship between supply and demand. Now let me show you what that looks like using demand curves. These curves show the relationship between supply, demand, and prices. So when the economy is just plugging along normally and demand and supply are in balance, we call that equilibrium. That is the normal state of the economy. But as things shift, like in this case, where we're going to see the supply of certain products constricted, that equilibrium price will shift. And assuming that demand remains constant, the prices of those things that are impacted will go up because of that reduced supply. A great example of this from recent history is when egg prices went crazy last year. The reason for that was because millions of chickens contracted the bird flu and had to be euthanized, which led to a decrease in the supply of eggs and a corresponding increase in prices. So what about lumber? Well, there are a few things that we need to understand here. The first is, how much lumber are we actually importing from other countries, and how much lumber is going to be coming through those ports that are closed? Well, the US is actually one of the largest lumber producers in the world. We produce about 70% of all the lumber that we use. Of that 30% that we import, about half of that is produced in Canada. Now this means that 85% of the lumber produced in the US would not be impacted by these strikes because it's not coming through the ports that are being closed. Another thing to consider is that this strike only impacts ports on the East Coast. The dock workers on the West Coast have a different union and are not currently on strike. So again, looking at our lumber imports, we also need to factor in lumber from places that would ship to the West Coast, including China, Vietnam, and other countries that would ship through the Pacific. So that leaves less than 10% of the lumber that may be coming into this country from other countries like Sweden, Finland, Germany, or Brazil. These are the countries that would be shipping through the Atlantic and would be impacted by this strike. So here's the thing. The true impact of the strike is really going to depend on how long it lasts. The last time longshoremen went on strike like this was back in 1977, and that strike lasted 44 days. And in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't more than a blip. Now today, I think that we are a bit more dependent on foreign goods than we were back in 1977. So this strike may be a little bit more impactful than that, especially if it goes on for a really long time. But lumber, in my opinion, really is an exception. Not only because we get most of our lumber from sources that would not be impacted by the strike, but also because some lumber mills are currently producing below their capacity and could probably handle a bit more demand in the short term if needed. If the strike goes on for a really long time though, then it could be a huge problem. But with the building season winding down right now, a huge increase in demand is not likely until spring, and hopefully by then this will all be resolved. Now there are certainly other products which would definitely be impacted more than lumber. Think of food imports, anything that we import from Germany or Africa or that part of the world. German cars, for example, or other things like that. The other side of this is that we also have to factor in American exports, because those things are not going to be going out from those ports either. So if anything, the largest impacts and price increases will probably be felt by Europeans because of a shortage of American goods. At the end of the day, though, it's really in everyone's best interest that this gets resolved as quickly as possible. If the pandemic taught us anything about our supply chains, it's that they are thin and that weak links can cause all sorts of problems. But what do you guys think? Do you think that the impact is going to be more significant than I've demonstrated here, or do you think it's just going to be another blip? Be sure to leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. I actually love reading your comments and responding to them when I can. From my perspective though, I really don't expect lumber prices to be significantly impacted by this strike, especially if it's going to be resolved quickly. What will have a far bigger impact on lumber prices in the US going forward is going to be the US housing market, interest rates, mill closures, and then there's also the recent hurricanes. And I have a video coming out in a few days that'll explain what's going on there. So be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can see that. And of course, I'll link that here once that comes out. As always, be sure to like this video, share it with someone that you think will find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.